I've lived long enough to notice how families drift apart not with arguments, but with silence. Missed phone calls, birthdays that come and go, doors closing so quietly nobody hears. Most folks carry that weight until it's too late to set it down. But every now and then, someone gets a second chance. This is one of those stories. The cub's cry cut through the rain like a blade. Daniel Mercer pressed his telephoto lens against his eye, hands trembling. 20 meters out, a rock no bigger than a kitchen table. On it, a lion cub, maybe 8 weeks old, shaking so hard its body blurred in the viewfinder. The Mara River churned brown and violent around the rock. His dog Scout stood rigid beside him. Ears forward, muscles coiled beneath wet golden fur. Easy, boy. Scout wasn't listening. The old golden retriever looked at Daniel, once brown eyes calm and certain, then jumped. Scout! The current grabbed him, spinning him downstream. Daniel waded into his thighs, screaming, the cold water hitting like a fist. Scout disappeared under the surface, came up gasping, and kept swimming toward that rock. If this story speaks to you, let us know where you're watching from. We love hearing from folks all across the country. And if you've been enjoying without subscribing, we'd be grateful for your support. Thank you kindly. Daniel's boots filled with water. Cold shot up his legs, into his gut. He grabbed a half-submerged branch to steady himself, eyes locked on the golden shape fighting the current. Scout angled upstream, not swimming straight, working the water, letting it carry him in a long diagonal toward the rock. Margaret's training, all those summers in the backyard, the lake, the search and rescue drills she'd run before the cancer took her. Muscle memory buried under 9 years of arthritis and gray fur. The cub saw the dog coming. It backed toward the edge of the rock, spine arched, mouth open in a silent hiss. "Come on, boy, come on." Daniel's voice was lost in the roar of the river. His hands shook against the branch. Not the tremor, something else. Something older, pure fear. Scout reached the rock. His front paws scrabbled on wet stone. Slipped. He went under, came up, tried again. This time he found purchase. Dragged himself onto the narrow ledge, flanks heaving, water streaming from his coat. The cub backed away. Hissing. Terrified. Scout lay flat, chin on the stone. Still. Waiting. Daniel stopped breathing. Seconds stretched. The river screamed past. The cub's hissing faded to a whimper. It crept forward, one paw, two. Sniffed Scout's muzzle, then climbed onto the dog's back. Daniel's knees buckled. He caught himself on the branch, tearing skin from his palm. Scout pushed off the rock. The return was worse. The cub's weight may be 15 pounds, but 15 pounds of squirming, clawing terror pushed Scout lower in the water. His head barely cleared the surface. His strokes shortened, weakened. Halfway back, Scout went under. Daniel lunged deeper, water to his chest now, the cold stealing his breath. Scout surfaced, gasping. The cub still clinging to his back, claws buried in golden fur. 10 meters. 5. Daniel reached. His fingers brushed wet fur, grabbed, pulled. They tumbled onto the muddy bank together, man, dog, cub, a tangle of limbs and gasping breaths. The cub rolled free, crying. Scout collapsed, chest heaving, eyes half closed. Daniel pulled the old dog against him, felt the heartbeat weak, fast, but there, still there. "I got you," he whispered. "I got you, boy." Scout's tail moved once, just once. Then Daniel heard it, a low rumble from the tall grass behind him. Not thunder, something alive. He turned. 5 shapes emerged from the vegetation. Golden, massive, eyes fixed on him. The pride had found them. Daniel's hand moved to his belt. Nothing there, no knife, no radio, Just a camera strap and wet fabric, 3 lionesses, 1 young male with a patchy mane, and behind them, moving through the grass like a boulder come to life, the dominant male, dark mane matted with rain, scars across his muzzle, shoulders rolling with each step, 400 pounds, maybe more. Daniel's bladder loosened. He clenched, held it. His throat had closed to a pinhole. Scout lay in his arms, too exhausted to lift his head. The cub mewled somewhere behind them, a thin sound swallowed by the blood pounding in Daniel's ears. The lions stopped, 15 meters away, close enough to charge in seconds, far enough to watch. The lead lioness, the mother, had to be turned her head toward the crying cub. Her ears swiveled, her nostrils flared. Then she walked forward, alone. The other stayed back, watching. Daniel's muscles locked. He couldn't run, couldn't fight, couldn't do anything but watch her come. She moved without hurry, each paw placement deliberate. Her eyes amber. Unblinking, shifted between the cub and the dog in Daniel's arms. 10 meters, 8, 5. Scout's tail moved against Daniel's arm. The old dog lifted his head, looked at the lioness. No growl, no bared teeth, just those brown eyes, calm and steady, meeting hers. She stopped, close enough that Daniel could smell her wet fur, something musky, something wild, close enough to see the individual whiskers on her muzzle, the mud caked between her toes. Her head lowered toward Scout. Daniel stopped breathing. Down. Down. Her nose nearly touched the dog's muzzle. A long exhale through her nostrils. Warm breath washing over Scout's face. She held there. 2 heartbeats. 3. Daniel didn't know what he was seeing. Threat assessment, curiosity. The beginning of an attack. His mind grasped for explanations and found nothing that fit. The lioness stepped back, turned, walked to her cub. She sniffed it thoroughly. Head, belly, paws. The cub pressed against her, crying. She licked its face with a tongue the size of Daniel's hand. Then she picked it up by the scruff and carried it toward the pride. The other lions hadn't moved. The big male watched Daniel with eyes that held no aggression, no interest, nothing Daniel could read, just observation, assessment, the ancient calculation of a predator deciding if something was worth the effort. The mother reached the pride. The young male sniffed the cub. One of the other females did the same. Then, without signal, Daniel could see. They turned as a group and moved into the tall grass. The dominant male stayed. He looked at Daniel, at Scout. That scarred face, those amber eyes, holding Daniel's gaze for a long moment. Daniel wanted to believe something passed between them. Recognition, acknowledgement, the kind of moment that would make sense of what had just happened. But maybe he was seeing what he needed to see. A man who had spent 30 years documenting other people's miracles, desperate to witness one of his own. The lion turned, walked after his pride, disappeared into the vegetation. Gone. Daniel sat in the mud, holding his dog, shaking so hard his teeth clicked together. Tears ran down his face, mixing with rain and river water. He didn't know when he'd started crying. Didn't care. Scout licked his wrist. Once, twice. "What was that?" Daniel whispered. What just happened? The sound of an engine, tires on wet ground. Joseph's Land Rover crested the ridge, sliding to a stop 20 meters away. The old guide was out before the vehicle stopped moving, running through the mud, his face tight with concern. "Mzee, I heard you screaming." He stopped, looked at Daniel, at Scout, at the tracks pressed deep into the mud around them. Lion tracks, everywhere. What happened? Daniel opened his mouth, closed it. His voice came out cracked, barely his own. "They came, the whole pride. They surrounded us." I see the tracks. Joseph knelt, examining the impressions. His weathered hands traced the outline of a massive paw print. This is the big male, the one they call Scar. He's killed 2 Maasai cattle this year. He didn't kill us. Joseph looked up. His eyes moved from Daniel to Scout, back to Daniel. Tell me what happened. All of it. Scout saved a cub. From the river. It was drowning on a rock and he swam out and brought it back. Daniel's words tumbled out, disjointed. The pride came. The mother walked up to Scout, got close, really close, sniffed him. Then she just took the cub and left. Joseph was quiet for a long moment. He pulled a cigarette from his pocket, lit it with hands that shook slightly, took a long drag. 40 years, he said finally. 40 years I've guided in this bush. I've seen lions do many things. I've seen them kill, mourn, play, fight. He looked at Scout, at the old dog still cradled in Daniel's arms. I've never seen them spare a dog, not once. What does it mean? Joseph exhaled smoke, watched the grass where the pride had vanished. Hard to say what a lion's thinking. Mzee, maybe nothing. Maybe she was just checking on her cub and you got lucky. He dropped the cigarette, ground it out with his heel. Or maybe your dog showed her something she understood. He helped Daniel stand. Together, they carried Scout to the Land Rover, laying the dog gently across the back seat. Daniel climbed in beside him, one hand resting on the wet fur. Take us back to camp, Daniel said. He needs a vet. Joseph nodded, started the engine. As they pulled away, Daniel looked back through the rear window. The river still churned. The rock where the cub had waited was barely visible now, the water rising to swallow it. And in the tall grass, just for a moment, he saw movement, a shape larger than the others, moving slowly. Favoring one leg badly, the mother lioness. Something was wrong with her. The wildlife medical station smelled of disinfectant and wet concrete. Daniel laid Scout on the examination table, his arms burning from carrying 60 pounds of wet dog across the camp. Elena Whitfield looked up from her inventory clipboard. Mid-40s, sharp jaw, hair pulled back so tight it stretched the skin at her temples. She wore a khaki vest with too many pockets and the expression of someone who had already decided you were wasting her time. What happened? He needs help. She set down the clipboard, approached the table. Her hands moved over Scout with clinical efficiency, pressing his chest, checking his gums, lifting his eyelids. Pulse elevated, mild hypothermia. These cuts on his belly, where did he get these? The river. He swam out to a rock in the flood. Why would you let him do that? I didn't let him do anything. There was a cub, a lion cub, stranded. He went in before I could stop him. Elena's hands paused on Scout's ribcage. She looked up at Daniel. Her eyes were the color of Riverstone's gray, flat, giving nothing away. A lion cub? Yes. And your dog swam through floodwater to rescue it? Yes. She resumed her examination. Pressed along Scout's spine, flexed each leg. The dog whimpered when she touched his left hip. Strained muscle, not torn. He's lucky. She opened a cabinet, pulled out bandages and antiseptic. The cuts are superficial. He'll be sore for a few days. Keep him rested. Daniel exhaled. His hands had started shaking again, the familiar tremor. Worse when he was exhausted. He pressed them flat against his thighs. The pride came after. Elena didn't look up. She was cleaning the cuts on Scout's belly, her movements precise and impersonal. The mother came close, really close. She sniffed Scout, then took the cub and left. The whole pride just walked away. And you're standing here too. So obviously they didn't attack. No. The mother got within a meter of Scout, lowered her head, breathed on him. Then backed off. Now she looked up. Her eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch. Lowered her head. I know how it sounds. Joseph saw the tracks. He said in 40 years he's never seen lions spare a dog. Elena set down the antiseptic, straightened. Her arms crossed over her chest. "Mr. Mercer, lions don't perform rituals. They don't feel gratitude. They're apex predators operating on instinct and survival calculus. What you saw was probably a threat assessment. She determined you weren't worth the effort and moved on. Maybe. I'm not claiming to know what she was thinking." "Good, because you don't." She turned back to Scout, applying a bandage with more force than necessary. "More importantly, do you understand what you've done? That cub now has your dog's scent all over it. The pride may reject it. Cubs get abandoned for less." Daniel's jaw tightened. "My dog saved its life." "Your dog interfered with a natural process." Elena stripped off her gloves, threw them in a waste bin. "Nature isn't a rescue mission, Mr. Mercer. It's a system. When we intervene, we break things. Sometimes we break things so badly they can't be fixed. So you would have let the cub drown?" "Yes." No hesitation, no apology. "That's how it works. The weak die, so the strong survive. It's been working for 1,000,000 years." Daniel stared at her. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Scout's breathing had steadied, his eyes half closed. "That's cold. That's reality." Elena picked up her clipboard. "Your dog will be fine. Keep him in your tent for 48 hours, no activity, and stay away from that pride. You've caused enough damage." She walked to the door, stopped with her hand on the frame. "One more thing. Joseph will tell everyone what he thinks he saw. By tonight, the whole camp will be talking about the miracle dog and the grateful lions." Her voice hardened. "There was no miracle, Mr. Mercer. Just a confused predator response and a tourist who doesn't understand how the bush works." She left. Daniel stood alone with the Scout in the harsh light. The dog's tail moved weakly, brushing against the metal table. "She's wrong," Daniel said quietly. "I know what I saw." But doubt had crept in. The cold, clinical kind. The kind that whispered, "Maybe you're losing it. Maybe the Parkinson's is affecting your perception. Maybe you're so desperate for meaning that you're finding it where there is none." He rubbed his eyes. Exhaustion pressed down on his shoulders like wet sand. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, expecting Joseph, a text notification. The contact name made his stomach clench. Rebecca. He hadn't seen that name light up his screen in 6 years. Not since the funeral. Not since she'd turned her back and walked away without a word. His brother Frank must have told her where he was. That was the only explanation. Frank had always been the peacemaker, the one who called on holidays and tried to keep the family threads from unraveling completely. Daniel's thumb hovered over the notification. His hand shook, not the tremor this time. Something else. He opened it. "Dad, I heard from Uncle Frank that you're in Kenya. I'm flying to Nairobi next week for a conference. I wasn't going to reach out, but I've been thinking." The message ended there. 3 dots appeared at the bottom of the screen, pulsing. She was typing more. Daniel held his breath. The dots disappeared. No new message came. He stared at the screen until it went dark in his hand. His reflection looked back at him gaunt, unshaven, older than he remembered. She'd reached out. After 6 years of silence. After everything. Why now? And what was she thinking that she couldn't finish typing? Scout whined softly. Daniel looked down at the old dog, at the bandages on his belly, at the gray muzzle that had once been pure gold. "What do I do, boy?" he whispered. "What do I say to her?" Scout's eyes met his, patient, waiting, offering no answers. Outside, the sun was setting over the Mara. The sky had turned purple and red and angry orange. Somewhere out there, a pride of lions was settling in for the night. A cub was nursing from its mother, a mother who was limping badly on her hind leg. Daniel thought about Elena's words. Nature isn't a rescue mission. He thought about the lioness he'd glimpsed through the rear window, the way she'd moved, the way her weight had shifted away from that back leg. Something was very wrong with her, and if she couldn't walk, she couldn't hunt, couldn't protect her cub, couldn't survive. The Cub Scout had saved might lose its mother anyway. Daniel carried Scout back to his tent. The dog was asleep before they crossed the threshold. Exhaustion finally winning. He laid Scout on the cot, covered him with a blanket, and sat in the canvas chair beside him. The tent smelled of damp canvas and citronella. Outside, the camp generator hummed its endless drone. Voices drifted from the main lodge staff preparing dinner, the clink of plates, someone laughing at a joke Daniel couldn't hear. He pulled out his phone. Rebecca's message still glowed on the screen. "I've been thinking." 3 dots. Then nothing. He tried to imagine her on the other end. 28 now, a lawyer, environmental law. Margaret had mentioned near the end, when she still had strength to talk about the future. She's doing good work, Danny, fighting for rivers and forests. When had Rebecca become someone he didn't know? He opened the photo folder, the one labeled R. The first image Rebecca at 7, gap-toothed smile, chocolate frosting on her chin. Her birthday party, the one he'd missed because he was in Sarajevo, crouched behind a concrete barrier while bullets chipped the wall above his head. He remembered the phone call, the connection cutting in and out. Her voice, small and hurt. "You missed my cake, Daddy. I'll make it up to you, sweetheart. That's what you always say." He'd said it so many times it had become meaningless, a verbal tick, a promise shaped like words but hollow inside. The second image Rebecca at 18. Graduation cap and gown. Margaret had taken this photo. Daniel was in Kabul that day, embedded with a Marine unit clearing buildings in the old city. He'd sent roses 24, the most expensive arrangement the florist could manage. Margaret's text that night. She threw them away. "Don't call. She doesn't want to talk to you." He hadn't called. The third image Margaret in the hospital bed. Bald, thin, still smiling, always smiling, even when she had every right to curse his name. He'd been here when he got the email. Kenya, the same camp, a different tent, 3 in the morning, unable to sleep, scrolling through images on his laptop. Biopsy results back. Stage 3. Please come home. 40 hours to get a flight. 40 hours of layovers and delays and sitting in plastic chairs watching departure boards change. By the time he walked through their front door, Margaret had already finished her first round of chemo. "You're late," she said. But she smiled. She always smiled. The fourth image, the funeral, shot from a distance, probably by Uncle Frank. The casket, the flowers, Rebecca standing on the opposite side, her face a mask of controlled grief. He'd tried to approach her afterward, wanted to hold her, tell her they still had each other, that they could get through this together. She turned her back. "Don't," she said, one word, final as a closing door. He hadn't heard her voice since. Daniel closed the phone. The tent walls pressed in, close and suffocating. Scout's breathing filled the silence slow, steady, trusting. He looked at the unsent letter on the small camp desk, version 47. He'd written it 2 weeks ago, in a hotel room in Nairobi, drunk on cheap whiskey and cheaper regret. "Dear Rebecca, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. I was never the father you deserved. I chose my camera over you, again and again. Your mother forgave me, but she was a saint. You have every right to hate me, Wo. I hate myself most days." He couldn't finish reading it. He knew every word. They changed nothing. Margaret's last words to him, whispered in that hospital room while machines beeped and nurses moved like ghosts in the hallway. "Go find Rebecca. Fix it. Promise me." "I promise." 2 years. He still hadn't kept it. Scout stirred in his sleep, paws twitching, chasing something in a dream. Maybe the river, maybe the cub, maybe memories of Margaret, of the backyard, of a time when everything was simpler. Daniel rubbed his eyes. The tremor in his left hand was worse to night stress, exhaustion, the adrenaline crash. He pressed it flat against his thigh until the shaking stopped. 6 months since the diagnosis. 6 months of watching his own body betray him, one small tremor at a time. The neurologist in Chicago had been kind but honest early stage. Slow progression, probably years before significant impairment. Probably. He hadn't told anyone. Not Uncle Frank, not the few friends he had left, certainly not Rebecca. How do you tell a daughter who already hates you that you're dying? How do you ask for forgiveness and announce your mortality in the same breath? It felt like cheating, like trying to buy grace with pity. So he'd come here instead. Kenya, the bush, the animals that didn't care about his failures, his regrets, his shaking hands. He told himself it was about photography. One last great project before his fingers couldn't hold a camera steady. The truth was simpler and uglier he was hiding. Elena's words echoed in his mind. Nature isn't a rescue mission. Neither was this trip. Daniel stood. His knees ached, his back protested, and his hands wouldn't stop their quiet rebellion. But he couldn't sit here anymore, staring at walls and photographs and the wreckage of his own choices. He needed air. He needed to move. He stepped outside. The sun had fully set, and the Mara stretched out under a sky thick with stars, more stars than he'd ever seen in Chicago, in New York, in any city where humans had pushed back the dark. The air smelled of wood smoke and wet grass and something underneath, something ancient and wild. He walked to the edge of camp. The fence line, such as it was a few strands of wire, more psychological than practical. Beyond it, the savannah rolled away into darkness. Somewhere out there, hyenas were calling to each other, their whooping cries rising and falling, and somewhere out there Tsantinti, a lioness, was hurting. He'd seen her through the Land Rover's rear window. The limp, the way she'd held that back leg off the ground. He'd photographed enough wounded animals to know what injury looked like, the way it changed movement, the way it promised worse to come. She had days, maybe a week, without treatment. She was already dead, her body just hadn't caught up yet. And when she died, the Cub Scout saved would lose its mother. The pride might accept it, might let the other females nurse it, or they might not. Cubs without mothers were vulnerable, weak, nature's math again. Daniel thought about what Joseph had said. Maybe your dog showed her something she understood. If that was true, if lions could recognize something in a 9-year-old dog worth sparing, what did that say about the cub's mother, about some kind of debt? If such a thing existed between species that should have been enemies. He was thinking like a tourist, like a sentimentalist. Elena would laugh at him. But Elena hadn't been there. Elena hadn't seen the way the lioness approached Scout, the way she'd lowered her head, the long exhale of breath. Daniel walked back to his tent. Scout was still asleep, chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. The bandages on his belly were clean, no sign of bleeding. He grabbed his camera bag, checked the battery, the memory cards. Habit, mostly. He didn't know what he was planning, only that he couldn't stay here, couldn't sit and wait and do nothing while what? While a wild animal died of natural causes. While the system Elena worshipped took its course, he set the bag down. Sat on the edge of the cot, his hand resting on Scout's flank. "What would you do, boy?" he whispered. "You didn't think about it in the river. Didn't calculate the odds. You just jumped." Scout's ear twitched. His eyes stayed closed. Daniel's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, heart jumping. Rebecca. Another message. I don't know why I'm texting you. I told myself I wouldn't. But Mom's anniversary is next week and I keep thinking about things she said. She made me promise something before she died. I'm not ready to tell you what, but I think we need to talk. Not text. Talk. Can you call me tomorrow? Early your time? I have meetings all afternoon. Daniel read it twice, 3 times. She wanted to talk. After 6 years of silence, she wanted to hear his voice. Margaret had made her promise something. The same way Margaret had made him promise to find Rebecca, to fix things. His hands were shaking again. Not the tremor, something else. He typed a response, I'll call. 6 a.m. your time. I'll be here. Sent it before he could second-guess himself. Then he sat in the dark, listening to Scout breathe, watching the stars through the gap in the tent flap, and trying to imagine what words he could possibly say to the daughter he'd abandoned for 30 years of photographs. The lioness with the injured leg surfaced in his mind again. He couldn't shake her image the way she'd moved, the way her weight had shifted, the way the cub had pressed against her flank. Tomorrow, he would go back tomorrow, just to see, just to know how bad it was. And then he didn't let himself finish the thought. Morning came, gray and cool. Daniel woke with his hand still resting on Scout's side, his neck stiff from sleeping upright. The dog was awake, watching him with those patient brown eyes. Morning, old man. Scout's tail moved. Once, twice. Daniel checked his phone. 5:47 a.m. local time. In Seattle, Rebecca would be getting ready for bed. Their call was scheduled for tomorrow, her tomorrow. His day after. He had time. He left Scout in the tent with water and food, a note for Joseph to check on him, grabbed his camera bag, a bottle of water, his binoculars. The Land Rover was parked where Joseph had left it. Keys under the visor. The drive took 20 minutes. The roads were still soft from the flood, and twice he had to navigate around pools of standing water that hadn't been there 3 days ago. The savannah was waking up around him, zebras grazing in the middle distance, a giraffe moving through a stand of fever trees, a pair of secretary birds stalking through the grass on their long, improbable legs. He found the Pride 2 kilometers from the rescue site, not clustered together spread out across a dry stream bed, resting in patches of shade. Daniel parked 50 meters away, raised his binoculars. The cub was there, tumbling over its siblings near an acacia tree, pouncing on tails and ears with the boundless energy of the very young. The young male lay apart from the group, watching the horizon with half-closed eyes. The other females groomed each other, their massive tongues rasping over fur and skin. But the mother, she wasn't with them. Daniel scanned the area. Nothing. Just grass and scattered trees and the Pride going about its morning. He started the engine, drove slowly along the stream bed, searching. He found her 300 meters from the others, alone, lying in a shallow depression where the grass was thinner, her body half hidden by a termite mound. She wasn't resting. She was collapsed. Daniel parked, raised his binoculars again, hands steady now with focus. The wound was worse than he'd imagined. Much worse. A deep gash ran from her hip nearly to her knee, the fur around it matted with dried blood and something darker pus. Infection. The beginning of tissue death. The flesh around the edges was swollen and discolored, angry red fading to black at the margins. She'd probably caught it on something in the flood. A submerged branch, a sharp rock, a piece of debris carried by the current. The wound itself might have been survivable, but the infection was killing her. Daniel lowered the binoculars. His hands were steady now, the way they always were when he had a task, when his body had something to focus on besides its own deterioration. Elena's voice, the weak die, so the strong survive. Margaret's voice, the camera lets you hide. Danny, it lets you pretend you're just observing. But you're not. You're choosing. Every time you take a picture instead of acting, you're choosing. He'd been choosing wrong for 30 years. Daniel started the engine, turned the Land Rover back toward camp. Elena was in the medical station when he found her, cataloging supplies with the same clinical efficiency she brought to everything. She didn't look up when he entered. "Mr. Mercer, I thought I told you to rest your dog." "He's fine. I need to talk to you." "I'm busy. The mother lioness, the one whose Cub Scout saved, she's injured." Elena's pen paused mid-notation. She still didn't look up. "I found her this morning," Daniel continued, "separated from the pride, deep laceration on her hind leg, infected, bad, she can barely move, and she's going to die." "Probably." Elena resumed writing. "That happens. You could save her." Now she looked up. Her eyes were flat, expressionless. "No. You have the supplies, the training. You could. I could. I won't." She set down the clipboard. "We've had this conversation, Mr. Mercer. I don't interfere with natural processes. She's not dying of natural causes. She got hurt in the flood, a flood that's worse than normal because of climate change, because of human activity. There's nothing natural about it." "That's a stretch." "Is it?" Daniel stepped closer. "We build dams upstream. We change the water table. The rains come harder, last longer, flood worse than they used to. An animal gets hurt because of conditions we created. And you call that natural selection?" Elena's jaw tightened. "What I call it is irrelevant. The policy exists for a reason. The moment we start deciding which animals deserve saving, we destroy the ecosystem we're trying to protect. One lioness, one treatment. You're not rewriting evolution. Today, it's one lioness. Tomorrow, it's every wounded animal in 100 kilometers. Where does it end?" She crossed her arms. "I've been here 15 years. Mr. Mercer, I've watched hundreds of animals die. Some of them I could have saved. I didn't. Because if I saved them, the next vet would feel obligated to save more, and the one after that even more, until we've turned the Mara into a zoo. So you let them suffer. On principle, I let nature take its course. There's a difference." Daniel stared at her. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere outside, a bird called a sharp, repetitive cry. "The nearest Kenya Wildlife Service station is 4 hours away," he said. "The roads are still half flooded. By the time anyone got here, she'd be dead. You're her only chance." "Then she has no chance." Elena picked up her clipboard. "I'm sorry, Mr. Mercer, truly, but this is how it has to be." She turned back to her inventory. Daniel stood there, the rejection settling into his chest like a stone. He thought about the cub, pressing against its mother's flank, about Scout in the river, paddling toward a rock that held something worth saving, about all the times he'd chosen the photograph over the person. "Your husband," Daniel said quietly. "Joseph mentioned him." Elena went very still. "He was killed by a lion. 10 years ago. You were there." "Don't." "He was trying to help an animal, wasn't he?" "That's why you stopped. That's why you built this wall, because helping cost you everything and you can't stand the thought of, get out." Her voice was cold, controlled, but her hands had curled into fists at her sides. "Dr. Whitfield, get out of my clinic. Mr. Mercer, now." Daniel held her gaze for a long moment. Then he turned and walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame. "That cub is going to watch its mother die," he said without turning around. "The same cub my dog risked his life to save." He left before she could respond. Outside, the sun was climbing higher. The camp was waking up guides loading vehicles, kitchen staff preparing breakfast, the smell of coffee drifting from the main lodge. Daniel walked past all of it. His heart was pounding. His hands were shaking. He'd gone too far, said things he had no right to say, but he couldn't stop thinking about the lioness, about the cub pressing against her flank, about Scout in the river, paddling against the current toward something that needed saving. If Elena wouldn't help, there was only one option left. He would have to do it himself. 3 a.m. The camp slept under a blanket of stars so thick they seemed to press down on the earth. Daniel lay on his cot, eyes open, staring at the canvas ceiling. Scout's breathing filled the silence, slow, steady, recovered. The old dog slept with his head on Daniel's foot, warm weight anchoring him to something real. He hadn't slept. Couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the lioness, the wound, the infection spreading through tissue and bone. She had days, maybe less. After that, the math was simple. No hunting, no protection for her cub, no survival. Daniel sat up. Scout's head lifted, ears forward. "Stay here, boy." Scout stood, shook himself, looked at Daniel with those patient brown eyes that said he wasn't staying anywhere. Stubborn old man. The same could be said about him. Daniel dressed in the dark, cargo pants, boots, the khaki shirt he'd worn for 3 weeks straight. His hands trembled as he buttoned the familiar tremor. Worse in the dark, worse when he was tired. He pressed his palms flat against his thighs until the shaking stopped. The medical station was across the compound, 50 meters of open ground, a single security light casting weak yellow circles on the dirt path, no guards, no cameras, just locks and keys and the assumption that no one would be foolish enough to steal veterinary supplies in the middle of the African bush. He found the spare key where Joseph had mentioned camp staff kept it under a cracked flower pot beside the back door. Old habit from bush camps where locked doors meant nothing if someone needed supplies in an emergency. Inside. The clinic smelled of antiseptic and animal musk. Shelves lined with supplies cast shadows in the dim emergency lighting. Daniel moved by memory, by the layout he'd observed during his argument with Elena, tranquilizer rifle, a Dan Inject Model J-M, heavier than he'd expected. He'd seen wildlife vets use them on shoots, knew the basics: point, aim, squeeze, hope, darts, a box of Zolotil mixtures, pre-loaded for large cats. He took 4, 1 for the shot, 3 for backup if he missed, antibiotics, amoxicillin clavulinate, the broad-spectrum kind that could knock down almost any infection, a bottle of saline, surgical thread, needle drivers, antiseptic, bandages. He loaded everything into a duffel bag. His hands had stopped shaking, the focus helping, the task settling his nervous system the way it always did. Scout waited by the Land Rover, tail wagging weakly. "All right, old man, let's go do something stupid." The drive took longer in the dark. The headlights carved tunnels through the blackness, revealing grass and mud and the occasional pair of eyes reflecting back night jars. Civets, things that lived in the space between sunset and dawn. Daniel's mind wandered as he drove. Rebecca's message. The call scheduled for tomorrow. What would he say to her? How do you compress 30 years of failure into a phone conversation? He thought about Margaret, about the way she'd looked at him in the hospital, the cancer hollowing her out from the inside while she worried about everyone else. Go find Rebecca. Fix it. Promise me. He'd promised. He hadn't delivered, but tonight, maybe he could deliver something. Not to Rebecca, not to Margaret's memory, to a lioness who had spared his dog, who had shown him something he couldn't explain but couldn't deny. Dawn crept over the horizon as he reached the stream bed. The sky turned from black to purple to the color of a fading bruise. He parked the Land Rover and scanned the area with his binoculars. The Pride was there 1/2 kilometer away, clustered near the acacia trees where he'd seen them yesterday. but the mother wasn't with them. He found her where he'd left her, alone, 300 meters from her family, collapsed in that same shallow depression, her body half hidden by the termite mound. She hadn't moved. Maybe couldn't move anymore. Daniel parked 20 meters away, cut the engine, loaded the tranquilizer rifle. His hands shook rest tremor. The neurologist had called it worse when relaxed, better when focused on a task. He took a breath, steadied himself. The dosage on the dart was calibrated for an adult female lion. Enough to put her down for an hour, maybe 90 minutes, enough time to clean the wound, apply antibiotics, stitch her up. If he could get close enough, if she didn't kill him first. Scout whined from the back seat. "Stay here, boy. I mean it, this time." He stepped out of the Land Rover. The morning air was cool, carrying the smell of wet grass and something else rot. Infection. The smell of a body fighting a losing battle. The lioness saw him coming. Her head lifted, her lips pulled back, showing teeth. A low growl rumbled from her chest. Daniel stopped, 20 meters, too far for an accurate shot with shaking hands. He took another step, another. The growl deepened. Her ears flattened against her skull. 15 meters. He raised the rifle, braced it against his shoulder. His hands trembled. The crosshairs danced across her body shoulder, flank, haunch, breathe, focus. The way you used to focus before a shot in a war zone, everything narrowing to a single point. The tremor slowed. He squeezed the trigger. The dart flew wide, hit the termite mound 3 feet from her head. Dirt exploded. The lioness lurched, tried to stand, collapsed back down with a sound that was half roar, half scream. Daniel's hands were shaking badly now. He fumbled for a second dart, nearly dropped it, managed to load it into the rifle. The lioness was watching him. Amber eyes bright with pain and fear, and something else, the calculation of a predator deciding whether to spend her last strength on attack or defense. She chose defense. Stayed down, watched. Daniel raised the rifle again. Breathe. Focus. He fired. The dart hit her in the meaty part of her thigh. She flinched, tried to rise again, made it halfway up before her legs buckled. He waited, counting heartbeats. 1 minute. 2. Her head dropped, her eyes closed. He approached slowly. 10 meters. 5. 2. She was breathing slow, steady. Knocked out by the tranquilizer. Up close. She was enormous. 400 pounds of muscle and bone and survival instinct, temporarily silenced by chemistry. The wound was worse than it had looked through binoculars. Much worse. A jagged gash running from her hip nearly to her knee, the edges black with dead tissue, the center weeping pus and blood. The smell hit him rot, infection, decay. He opened the duffel bag, pulled out the surgical kit. His hands were steady now, the way they'd always been steady when he had a task. The tremor that plagued him at rest, that made him spill coffee and fumble with buttons, disappeared entirely when his fingers had purpose. He cleaned the wound with saline, cut away the dead tissue with surgical scissors, careful and precise. The lioness didn't stir. The cub appeared from somewhere. Daniel's heart stopped. But it was alone, no pride, no other lions, just a small, tawny shape creeping through the grass toward its mother. It stopped 3 meters away, watched Daniel with pale blue eyes, then lay down in the grass, waiting. Daniel returned to work, stitching now, neat, even sutures. Not pretty, he wasn't a surgeon, but functional. He'd learned basic field medicine in war zones, patching up wounded soldiers and civilians when no medics were available. The needle slipped, sliced across his palm. Blood welled up, hot and red. He cursed under his breath, wrapped his hand quickly with a spare bandage, kept working. Scout had disobeyed. The old dog was lying 10 meters away, watching Daniel work. When the cub saw him, it crept closer, sniffing the air. Scout stayed still. The cub settled beside him, pressing against golden fur. Daniel finished stitching, injected the antibiotics directly into the muscle beside the wound, applied antiseptic, wrapped the whole thing in clean bandages. When he looked up, the sun was high. He sat back on his heels, covered in blood and mud and lion fur, his back screaming from 2 hours of kneeling on hard ground. She would live, maybe. The infection was advanced, but the antibiotics were strong if her body could fight off what remained. If the wound could heal without reopening, she had a chance. It wasn't nothing. He heard the engine before he saw the vehicle. Elena's Land Rover cresting the ridge, sliding to a stop 30 meters away. Joseph in the passenger seat. 2 Rangers in the back, rifles raised. Elena was out before the vehicle stopped moving. Her face was white. "What have you done?" Daniel stood, his knees cracked, his back protested, blood seeped through the bandage on his palm. "I saved her. You broke into my clinic, stole my equipment, tranquilized a wild lion without authorization." Her voice shook with controlled fury. "Do you have any idea I should have you arrested? Kenya Wildlife Service will be filing charges. Your photography permits in Africa are finished." "I know." She stared at the scene. The sedated lioness. Scout. The cub pressed against the dog's side. Daniel, covered in blood, standing in the middle of something that shouldn't exist. How is this possible? Her voice had changed. The fury was fading, replaced by something else. She should have attacked. Before the tranquilizer took effect, she should have killed you. She tried to stand, couldn't. Even wounded. A lion can. Elena stopped, looked at the cub, at Scout, at the space between them. Joseph climbed out of the vehicle, lit a cigarette, surveyed the scene with the calm of a man who had seen everything and been surprised by nothing. "Well," he said quietly, "I'll be damned." Elena walked to the lioness, knelt. Her hands moved over Daniel's work, the stitches, the bandages, the injection site. "Sloppy," she said finally. "I'm not a surgeon." She could have bled out, the suture here too shallow. She examined the wound more closely. The cleaned tissue, the drainage. "But you got the necrotic tissue, most of it. Anyway, she'll live." Long pause. Elena's jaw worked. "Maybe. The infection was severe, but you removed the source. The antibiotics should handle the rest." She stood, wiped her palms on her khaki pants. "She'll need a week to recover, maybe more. She won't be able to hunt." "Will the pride stay with her?" Elena looked at the cub, still pressed against Scout's side, at the vast emptiness of the savannah around them. She separated herself. That's what wounded animals do. They leave the group so predators don't find the pride. She was quiet for a moment. "But if she recovers, they'll take her back. Lions remember their own." She turned to Daniel. Something had shifted in her face, the hard edges softening, the wall cracking just enough to let light through. "Tom would have done the same thing," she said. "Exactly the same stupid, reckless, irresponsible thing. I know. I hated him for it. When he died, I hated him for it, told myself I'd never make the same mistake." Daniel didn't respond. There was nothing to say. "It doesn't make it right," she said. "No, but maybe." She stopped, looked at Scout, at the cub pressed against the dog's side. Maybe right isn't always the point. The Rangers had lowered their rifles. Joseph was smoking, watching the horizon. Daniel looked down at the lioness, at the steady rise and fall of her chest, at the cub, trusting that its mother would wake up. He'd done something real, something that mattered. But as he watched, a new thought crept in. The lioness would survive, probably. The infection would clear, hopefully, but recovery would take time. Weeks. And in those weeks, she would be vulnerable, alone. He'd bought her time, but had he actually saved her, or had he just delayed the inevitable? Night came fast in the bush. One moment, the sky was orange and purple. The next, it was black and full of stars. Daniel sat outside his tent with a bottle of whiskey. The good stuff single malt, brought from Chicago for emergencies. He'd been saving it. Didn't know what for. Tonight seemed as good a time as any. Scout lay at his feet, bandaged belly rising and falling. The old dog had eaten, drunk water, and promptly fallen asleep. He'd earned the rest. Daniel had not earned anything. The adrenaline had drained out of him somewhere around sunset. What replaced it was worse. A hollowness that started in his chest and spread outward, filling his limbs with something heavy and cold. He'd saved the lioness. Maybe, Elena had checked his work, pronounced it adequate, mentioned the legal consequences that were coming, and left without another word. The rangers had driven him back to camp. Joseph had patted his shoulder and said something about courage. Courage. The word tasted like ash. He took a drink. The whiskey burned going down, settled in his stomach like liquid fire. His hands shook as he lowered the bottle. The tremor, always the tremor, reminding him of what was coming. He pulled out the letter, version 47, unfolded it with clumsy fingers. "Dear Rebecca," he read aloud, his voice slurring already. "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. I was never the father you deserved. I chose my camera over you, again and again. Your mother forgave me, son, but she was better than me, always better than me." Scout's ear twitched. The dog didn't wake. "You have every right to hate me. I hate myself most days. I don't know why I'm writing this. You won't read it. You won't forgive me. Why should you? I wouldn't forgive me." He crumpled the paper, threw it at the darkness. "What's the point?" His voice was too loud, ugly in the quiet night. "What's the damn point of any of it?" He took another drink. Longer this time. "I saved a lion today. Big hero. Can't save my own family, but I can save a lion." He laughed. The sound was wrong, broken, wet, pathetic. "That's what I am. A pathetic old man with shaking hands, drinking alone in the middle of Africa because he's too scared to go home." He stood. The ground tilted. He stumbled, caught himself on the tent pole. 30 years. 30 years of photographs. Wars and famines and disasters. And what do I have to show for it? A dead wife, a daughter who won't speak to me, a dog who's the only creature left who doesn't know what a failure I am. He walked toward the edge of camp. The whiskey sloshed in the bottle. The stars wheeled overhead, cold and indifferent. Margaret knew. She always knew. "You're always leaving. Danny. That's what she said. Even when you're here, you're already gone." He tripped over something in the dark, a root, a rock. Didn't matter. Went down hard on his hands and knees in the mud. The bottle flew from his grip, shattered somewhere in the darkness. He didn't get up. The mud was cold and wet, soaking through his pants, coating his palms. He could smell it, the iron tang of red African earth mixed with decay and something older, something that had been rotting in the ground since before humans walked upright. He knelt there in the muck. Couldn't find the strength to stand, couldn't find the will to care. This was what he deserved. This was who he really was. Not the photographer, not the hero who saved lions, just a broken man kneeling in mud in the middle of nowhere, drunk and alone and exactly where he belonged. "Mr. Mercer," Elena's voice. He didn't look up. "Go away." Footsteps in the dark. She didn't go away. She stood there, watching him kneel in the mud like a penitent, like a fool, like a drunk old man who had finally run out of places to hide. "You're pathetic," she said. "I know." She didn't move, didn't help him up, just stood there, stood. My husband used to drink after a hard day, she said. Said it helped him forget the ones he couldn't save. Did it? No. He just woke up sad and hung over instead of just sad. Daniel tried to laugh. The sound came out as a sob. My daughter hasn't spoken to me in 6 years. The words spilled out, unstoppable. I have Parkinson's, early stage, diagnosed 6 months ago. I came here because I don't know how to tell her. Don't know how to say, hey, sorry I was never there, and by the way, I'm dying. He'd never said it out loud before, any of it. The mud was seeping through his clothes now, cold against his skin. He could feel it on his knees, his shins, the palms of his hands pressed flat against the earth. Are you? Elena's voice was different now, softer. Dying. Eventually. Could be years, could be less. They don't know. Silence. An owl called somewhere in the darkness. The generator hummed its endless drone. Elena sat down on the dry ground beside the mud. Close enough to talk, far enough to stay clean. You're not pathetic, she said. You're scared. There's a difference. Doesn't feel like it. No, it doesn't. He finally looked at her. Her face was hard to read in the starlight, but something in her eyes had changed. The wall had cracked. Just a little. Can I tell you something, she asked. Can I stop you? You're running. You know that, right? You're not here for photographs. You're not here to save lions. You're here because it's easier than going home and facing your daughter. The words hit like a slap. He opened his mouth to argue, to defend himself, to explain. Nothing came out, because she was right. I know, because I did the same thing. Elena continued. After Tom died, I could have gone back to London. My mother was there, friends, a life. Instead, I came here, stayed 15 years, told myself I was doing important work. Really, I was just hiding. She stood, brushed dirt from her pants. You saved that lioness today. You did something brave, Mantitid, but it doesn't count if you're only brave when your own heart isn't on the line. She walked toward camp. Stopped. Call your daughter. Mr. Mercer, tell her the truth. All of it. That's the only thing that matters now. Not lions, not photographs, just the truth. She left. Daniel knelt in the mud, her words echoing in the darkness. The cold had seeped into his bones. His hands were shaking tremor and chill and something else, something that felt like the first crack in a dam he'd been building for 30 years. Call your daughter. Tell her the truth. He'd been planning to call Rebecca tomorrow, their scheduled conversation. He'd planned what to say careful words. Measured apologies. The same hollow promises he'd been making his whole life. But Elena was right. He'd been running. Even when he thought he was standing still, he was running. Scout appeared at the edge of the mud. The old dog whined, pawed at Daniel's arm. I know, boy, I know. He pushed himself up. Mud clung to his knees, his palms, his elbows. He looked like he'd been buried and dug himself out. Maybe he had. He walked back to the tent, found his phone. Rebecca's message still glowed on the screen. I think we need to talk. His thumb hovered over the call button. 1 in the morning in Kenya, 4 in the afternoon in Seattle. She'd be at work, in meetings, busy. He pressed it anyway. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Dad. Her voice. 6 years since he'd heard it. She sounded older, tired, uncertain, his throat closed. The words he'd prepared, all those careful, measured words, vanished like smoke. Rebecca, he said, I need to tell you something. I should have told you a long time ago. Silence on the other end. He could hear her breathing, waiting. I'm listening, she said. I'm listening, Rebecca said. Daniel pressed the phone against his ear. His hand was shaking, not the tremor. Something else. The mud on his clothes had started to dry, cracking against his skin. "I have Parkinson's." Silence. He could hear her breathing change a small catch, quickly controlled. "How long have you known?" "6 months." "And you're just telling me now?" "I didn't know how. I didn't think I had the right." More silence. Somewhere in Seattle, his daughter was processing information that should have come 6 months ago. Should have come in person, with explanations and context and all the things a father owes a child. "That's why you're in Kenya," she said. It wasn't a question. "Partly. Running away. Like always." The words should have stung. They didn't. She was right. "Yes." He heard her exhale, a long, slow release. "Mom made me promise something," Rebecca said. "Before she died, she made me promise to call you, to give you another chance. I've been fighting that promise for 2 years." Daniel's throat tightened. Margaret. Even dying. She'd been trying to fix what he'd broken. "Why now?" he asked. "I don't know. Uncle Frank called, said you were in Africa, sounded worried, and I thought—" Her voice wavered, steadied. "I thought, what if something happens to you out there? What if you die and the last thing I ever said to you was, 'Don't bother coming to Mom's funeral'? Rebecca, I'm not ready to forgive you." Her voice hardened. "I need you to understand that 28 years of broken promises don't disappear because you're sick. I know. But I'm tired of being angry. It's exhausting. And Mom asked me to try. So I'm trying." Daniel sat down on the edge of his cot. Scout padded over, pressed his head against Daniel's knee. "I'm flying to Nairobi next week," Rebecca continued. "There's a conference on conservation law. I wasn't going to tell you, but if you're still there, I'll be there. Don't make promises you won't keep. I'll be there." Silence. He could hear her thinking, weighing his words against 30 years of evidence. "We'll get coffee," she said finally. "That's all I'm offering, coffee and a conversation. If you don't show up, that's it. I'm done." "I understand." 6 a.m., your time on Tuesday. There's a cafe in the Norfolk Hotel. I'll text you the details." "Okay." Another pause, then, quieter. "Are you scared about the Parkinsons?" The question caught him off guard. Honest, direct, the way Margaret used to ask things. "Yes." "Good," Rebecca said. "You should be, but you should also know—" She stopped, started again. "You should know that I'm not going to let you go through it alone. Even if I'm still angry, even if I'm not ready to forgive you, you're still my father. That has to mean something." The line went dead before he could respond. Daniel sat in the darkness, the phone warm against his palm. Scout's head was heavy on his knee. The dried mud cracked and flaked as he shifted. She wasn't ready to forgive him. She'd said that twice. But she was willing to try. After 6 years of silence, after everything he'd done and failed to do, she was willing to show up for coffee. It wasn't absolution. It wasn't even close. But it was a start. Morning came gray and cool. Daniel woke with the dried mud still on his clothes and a clarity he hadn't felt in years. He found the crumpled letter on the floor of the tent. Version 47. Smoothed it out, read it one last time. "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. 54 years old, 23 of them spent hiding behind a camera, documenting other people's pain while ignoring his own family's, making promises he never intended to keep. He'd been waiting for permission. Permission to forgive himself, permission to reach out, permission to stop running. But no one could give that permission. Not Elena, not Joseph, not even Scout, lying at his feet with those patient brown eyes. Only he could choose. Scout had chosen in the river. No calculation, no hesitation. The old dog had seen something that needed saving and jumped. Daniel had spent his whole life taking pictures instead of acting, observing instead of participating. Margaret had tried to tell him. Rebecca had tried to tell him. Even Elena, a stranger, had seen it clearly. He folded the letter, put it in his pocket, not to send the conversation had already happened, but to remember, to remind himself what waiting looked like, what cowardice felt like, so he would recognize it next time. He scrubbed the dried mud from his hands and face, changed into clean clothes from his bag. Then he drove out to check on the lioness one last time. She was still in the shallow depression near the termite mound, still alone. But her head lifted when she heard the Land Rover alert now, watching him approach with amber eyes that held pain but also awareness. The bandages on her leg were dirty but intact. She hadn't torn them off, hadn't tried to stand. But she was alive. The cub was there too, curled against her side, nursing weakly. It looked up when Daniel parked, but didn't run. Didn't hide Buddy. Joseph's voice from yesterday. Maybe your dog showed her something. Something she understood. Daniel didn't know what Scout had shown the lioness. Didn't know if animals could recognize courage or loyalty or any of the things humans wanted to believe they understood. But he knew what Scout had shown him. He sat in the Land Rover for a long time, watching the lioness breathe, watching her cub nurse, watching the African sun climb higher over a world that didn't care about his failures or his regrets or his shaking hands. Tuesday, coffee with Rebecca, the beginning of something or the end. Either way, he would show up. A week later, Daniel packed his bags. The tent smelled of canvas and citronella, the same as it had when he'd arrived 3 weeks ago. But something had shifted. The weight he'd been carrying felt different now, still there, still heavy, but no longer crushing. Scout watched him fold clothes, roll socks, zip compartments. The old dog's tail moved whenever Daniel looked his way. Elena appeared at the tent flap. She looked uncomfortable, hands shoved deep in her vest pockets. So, you're leaving. Tomorrow. Early flight to Nairobi. The daughter. Rebecca, yes. Elena nodded, shifted her weight. I checked on the lioness this morning, she said. The wound is closing. No sign of recurring infection. She's still weak, won't be hunting for another week at least, but the pride found her. They're bringing her food. She'll make it. Probably. She's strong. Elena paused. You didn't kill her. That's something. Daniel zipped his duffel bag, set it on the floor. Thank you, he said, for not having me arrested. The corner of Elena's mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Don't thank me yet. I filed a report with Kenya Wildlife Service. Your photography permits in East Africa are revoked. You won't be working here again. Worth it. She looked at Scout. Something in her face softened. You're a strange dog, she said quietly. Saving lion cubs. Making predators hesitate. What's next, teaching elephants to dance? Scout's tail wagged. Elena knelt, rubbed his ears with both hands. Tom would have liked you, she said, her voice dropping. He always said dogs understood things people couldn't. She stood, wiped her palms on her pants, met Daniel's eyes. Good luck, Mr. Mercer, with your daughter, with everything. Daniel. Good luck, Daniel. She left without looking back. Morning came soft and golden. Daniel stood at the edge of camp, watching the light spread across the Mara. The river had receded. The roads were passable again. Safari vehicles moved in the distance, carrying tourists to see the animals they'd read about in guidebooks. The world was returning to normal, whatever normal meant in a place like this. He raised his camera. Habit, reflex. The viewfinder framed the sunrise amber and rose and pale gold spilling across the wet grass. Then he lowered it. Some moments didn't need capturing. Some moments were just for seeing. Scout leaned against his leg. Warm weight. Steady presence. 9 years old. Gray muzzle. Bad hip. Heart bigger than his body. "We're going home, boy," Daniel said. "Well, Nairobi first, then home." He didn't know what would happen with Rebecca. Maybe she'd listen and then walk away. Maybe she'd say all the things she'd been holding in for 6 years. Maybe she'd sit across from him in that hotel cafe and realize she had nothing left to say. It didn't matter. What mattered was showing up. Finally showing up. Margaret's voice. "One last time. You're always leaving, Danny. Even when you're here, you're already gone." But not anymore. He knelt down, rubbed Scout's ears the way Elena had. "You know what you did out there in that river." Scout looked at him, patient, waiting. "You showed me something I forgot a long time ago." He scratched under the dog's chin. "You didn't think about it, didn't make a plan. You just saw something that needed help, and you jumped. That's what Margaret always tried to tell me was shocked. That's what I never understood." Scout's tail wagged. Once, twice. "Yeah, I'm slow. But I get there eventually." He stood. His knees ached. His hands had that familiar tremor. He was 54 years old, with an incurable disease, and a daughter who might never fully forgive him. But for the first time in years, he wasn't running. He walked back to the Land Rover. Joseph was waiting. Engine idling. Cigarette smoke curling from the driver's window. "Ready, AMZ, ready." Scout jumped into the back seat, slower than he used to, favoring his left hip. Daniel climbed in beside him, behind them. Somewhere in the tall grass, a lion roared, not a threat, not a warning, just a sound, the sound of Africa saying goodbye. Or maybe not goodbye, maybe something else. Daniel looked back through the rear window. The camp grew smaller, the savannah stretched out, golden and endless. He wasn't healed, he wasn't forgiven, but he was finally moving in the right direction. That was enough. There's a certain quietness that settles after a story like this, something tender, maybe a little heavy, the kind of feeling that doesn't ask to be named or explained. Many of us have carried things we couldn't put down, regrets we couldn't speak aloud, letters we wrote but never sent, phone calls we should have made years ago but kept putting off, telling ourselves there would be more time. Some of us have loved people from a distance, wondering if we'd ever find our way back to them. And perhaps, like Daniel, we've discovered that the first step is simply deciding to stop running, not knowing where we'll end up, not needing to know, just choosing to turn around and face whatever's been waiting for us all along. It's all right if this story stirred something in you that still feels unfinished. Some things are allowed to rest without being resolved. Some doors stay half open, and that's okay too. We carry what we carry, we do what we can, and sometimes that's enough. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for listening.